Alrighty, so now going on to the next topic. Now we mentioned some draft stuff, and so let's go on to next part. We did previously we did wide receivers, quarterbacks. Now we're gonna do cornerbacks, CB or AKA DBs. For this, do our top three. John, would you like to go first?
Sure. Are we starting from number three?
Yeah, let's build up the excitement here because there's not as much of a clear conciseness with these, at least from what I've seen from Mel Kiper, ESPN, and Bleacher Report. So, yeah, who
All
is your number
right.
three?
Well, this position group impacts me a bit because the Cowboys, their secondary is pretty bad. Most people have them taking a corner, with that 10th overall pick. That's what I want them to take. There is one specific person that I want, and in my opinion, he's the best. But I'm pretty much comfortable with any of the guys who I have in my top three. I imagine our top threes are pretty similar because it seems like there's sort of a general consensus on at least the top two. Third one, you can kind of throw whoever you want in there. But for me, it's Mr. J.C. Horn out of South Carolina, the Gamecocks. Yeah, I think that he just has a really good measurables, really good size. I believe he's like 6'2", solid speed, solid vertical, really good pro day. And one of those guys who just sort of has that those ball instincts that you look for that can be really aggressive, make plays. He doesn't have the cleanest technique. And I wouldn't say he's necessarily the most physically overwhelming corner when it comes to, everything involved when it comes to like pressing and catch up speed and all that kind of stuff and following routes. But I think that he is absolutely a first round corner. In my opinion, he's probably going to go maybe late teens, early 20s. I think it could really just depend on what teams want in a corner. So, yeah, for me, number three is JC Horn. What about you?
It's my third corner. Is going to be cornerback Tyson Campbell out of Georgia. FYI, I do not have J.C. Horn on my top three. And I'll just say why. Just for him, I do agree with you a lot. I didn't like. I wasn't too impressed with his short area quickness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I feel like he'll be a really good zone corner, but especially in the NFL, you're gonna be asked to play man in critical situations. And if you're a first round corner, he just didn't have that. Uh, yeah, he just didn't have the agility that or the acceleration, the ability to change directions quickly and mirror that I typically would like in my first round corner, as opposed to the guy I have at three here, Mr. Campbell. Kind of similar boat, a little raw. He reminds me a lot of AJ Terrell from last year from Clemson. It seemed like same thing with Georgia did the same thing where they didn't really help him a lot, which is a good and bad thing. They just kind of left him to do man, so he kind of had to figure it out on his own. So he has a raw ability to play man. Oh, yeah, he made mistakes and he had things like that. But I think most of the mistakes he had were coachable, and also, I mean, he was on an island for the most part, and I just think that especially since he's my third cornerback, I imagine he'll go to a team that won't be leaving him on an island majority of the game. Now, granted, he can play on an island for on third downs and do that. He does have the quickness and the speed that I think he can. That I think he can run with NFL wide receivers. Not too I mean, he's got solid press, but it could be better. But it's to be honest, in any other draft class, he would probably be two or higher. It's just that the top two, where I feel like we have the same top two, these two are really good. And so, no shame that he's three. So, I guess we'll do snake draft here. So, my number two, and this was really tough, but my number two is Patrick Surtain the second out of Alabama. I mean, he can press, amazing technique. I mean, typical Alabama player. He is pro ready. He can play in the zone. He can play man. My only concern that I did not like him, opposed to my number one guy, just doesn't have the top end speed that I would like from a corner, as well as not just. And it's a shame. Once again, I'm going to say this. Opposed to my number one guy, he would be the top corner if it wasn't for the number one guy in this draft. But he's very good. And listen, if I know you mentioned you're looking at corner, if you get this guy or the other guy, I mean, I'm for your Cowboys. I think especially a Certain. I think he's a better scheme fit because you're going to be running the Seattle scheme. The cover three press bail. He's very good in press, very good in zone. So I think, if this other guy goes off the board, or then I think your Dallas Cowboys, you should be happy with getting Patrick Surtain. But yeah, amazing, great corner. Like I said, pro ready, play zone, play man. Just not quite the top end speed and agility that I would like. But once again, most years he would be probably the best corner or second best. So, yeah. What about you, John?
Uh, I mean, I agree overall. I think we have a similar top two, but I think mine are the reverse order. And I'll explain why. So for me,
I think
my
I know
number
why.
two guy is Mr. Caleb Farley. And the one thing I'll say about him is he's an athletic freak. So the things that Sertan does lack, that speed, Farley has it in bunches. I mean, it's reported that he's running 4.3s. Obviously, we'll get into that in a little bit. If you just watch the film, his closing speed is really
His
good.
acceleration is
He
amazing.
can recognize when the quarterback is making the throw, and he closes in with a quickness. And so that the instincts that he has, because I think a lot of people, when you hear a corner athletic freak, you tend to think, well, he's gonna lack in technique or instincts or whatever. His instincts are fantastic, also really good technique, solid when it comes to pressing on the line. I think I'd be comfortable with him, in both man and zone. And he's just got that big body frame that you sort of want from the more modern day corner. If you look at guys like the Richard Shermans and the Jalen Ramseys and all these different corners that are coming out, even CJ Henderson from the last draft, you just have more and more corners that are getting to be this more 6'1", 6'2" size. Even some guys that are 6'3", 6'4", that are still being able to maintain that speed just as the league is getting more and more athletic. So Caleb Farley to me is number two. The reason I have him not number one is the back surgery. I know that he has said that a lot of teams aren't going to be necessarily concerned about it, but honestly, for me, it was just so close between those two that if I had to pick one thing that I was a little more worried about when it comes to his longevity, his potential, something that could come up, is more concerning. Which this might be a little biased because I'm a Cowboys fan, and we've had Sean Lee, we've had Leighton Vander Esch, we had Tony Romo, we had Tyron Smith. We have a lot of players who deal with recurring injuries. A back injury for a corner is something that does worry me, could come up in the future. If it doesn't, I think whoever gets him is a steal. Ultimately, if the Cowboys do take him at 10, I would be over the moon. But my number one guy, the guy who I truly want, is Patrick Surtain. I agree with everything you said. He doesn't necessarily have that crazy top end speed, but I just think the size, the coverage ability, the things that I've seen out of him, I'm okay with that, especially considering that we have his partner in crime, Trevon Diggs, who is sort of similar, also doesn't have that top end speed. And I mean, while we did see there were some games, like for example, that Seattle play, which everyone loves to praise him for, and I give him a lot of credit for not giving up, where he punched the ball out from DK Metcalf from behind, he did get burned. That was the beginning of the play, and if DK doesn't make that simple careless mistake, that's a touchdown right there.
I lost because of that,
I
by the way, in fantasy. I have DK.
Yeah, that sucks.
I lost by
um,
3 points. I was like, God damn it.
but anyway, Sertan, I mean, I think him and Trevon Diggs are very similar. I mean, part of me might be just wanting to reunite the Alabama duo and just see what they can do together again. Like I said, though, if the Cowboys get Farley, I would not be mad. Ultimately, yeah, it was very close. These two corners are both very good. It's an interesting draft class year because it seems like most classes, there's a corner that seems to be in that top 5 range, when they're, on this level, because it feels like Surtain and Farley are very good. Um, but I think just because of the nature of this draft class and how many quarterbacks there are at the high level going, I mean, we could even not see a corner go until that Cowboys pick. If then, knowing the Cowboys, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't go corner, which seems like the most obvious, biggest need ever, and there's really good players there. But I truly hope they go with either of these top two guys, because although I have Surtain number one, I know that you're probably going to have Farley as number one. Um, I truly would be happy with either one.
Yeah, so I, I didn't factor in the back too much. But yeah, it's a real concern, especially for corner. It's a physically in the NFL, it's going to be a physically demanding position. But it's just the talent. Like if he Like this, it's like I was watching Jalen Ramsey
I
again.
would agree.
But I mean, because you said it all. I mean, he could mirroring perfect, great size, great closing ability, amazing. Like you said, amazing acceleration, and change of direction. And yeah, this is he is. I'm like I said, not counting the backs, keeping the back stuff out of mind. He can be the a premier corner. I have no doubt about that. But once again, that's the big issue is the back. But otherwise, I mean, any team that gets if he didn't have the back, I think he would I think Atlanta wouldn't be thinking about trading down at 4. I think Atlanta would probably grab him and not and be very happy. But because of the back issues, like you mentioned, yeah, maybe that's probably why a team like Atlanta and probably Detroit, they're not so sure. So maybe they'll want to trade back, knowing that a guy like him might be in the teens. If like you mentioned, if none of the corners go, maybe your Cowboys go Surtain because of the certainty and less scariness of the injury. And then maybe Atlanta, I don't know, trades back like 13, 14, gets extra picks. Okay, now we get our guy, but we also have extra picks, and we still got our guy, even though it was a risk. We kind of I don't want to say compensated the risk by getting more assets in case things go wrong. But yeah, it was a tough class. I mean, I feel like in comparison to last year's, I'm trying to think. I think these two guys would definitely be better than last year's class, just coming
Hmm.
out. So like you said, it's a very good class, at least at the top. I feel like that's like that for a lot of positions, and I do agree with you. I think I'm interested to see where corner goes. If I was a betting man, I would not bet on where corner would go because there's just so many premier players at certain positions. Like we talk about Jamar Chase, wide receiver, and Devonta Smith. I'm sure those two guys will go early. We'll maybe talk about tackles. I mean, there's Sewell and I think another maybe a tackle or two that could go early. There's a lot of really good premier picks, and we already know the top 3 are probably going to be quarterbacks. So I'd be very interested to see how how cornerbacks fall in the draft. I mean, my Packers, I would love for one of these top 3 guys that I mentioned because I feel like they're all definitely first rounders. I would love for any of them to fall to Green Bay, to pair with Jair. I know we brought back Kevin King, and like I mentioned before, Kevin King is he's better than what that Tampa Bay game showed. But I mean, who knows? I mean, I would love to make corner a strength. But regardless, that's my top 3. That's John's top 3. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we hit the edge guys?
I mean, just wanted to reiterate that this is a deep class. I mean, we named 4 different corners. We left out guys like Asante Samuel Jr. I mean, there's even more corners in this class that are, when you get into day 2, day 3, you're still going to be seeing a lot of solid corners taken. And I feel like in a class where we're about to talk about the edge rushers, in a class where I feel like the edge rusher, you know, group isn't necessarily as strong as some of the previous classes we've seen. The corner class has sort of made up for that and is, in my opinion, a little bit stronger than some of the previous years.
Yeah, I would agree. So